Hi, I'm Danny Ryan, VP of Marketing at ThreeWheel, and this is episode 159 of the Two Bald Brothers and a Microphone podcast, where we talk about the people, process, and technology to work together better inside of enterprises. This episode was recorded on May 31st, 2018. In this episode, I talked with Kirk Liemohn about FastTrack, a free program that helps enterprises move to the Microsoft Cloud. We discuss what's covered in the program and, more importantly, what's not covered. He also shares details on a recent successful project where we helped a large company by augmenting what FastTrack has to offer with our services. Enjoy this episode and thanks for listening. Hello and welcome to the Two Bald Brothers and a Microphone podcast. This is your host, Danny Ryan, and I am here with Kirk Liemohn. How are you doing, Kirk?
Doing well.
Excellent. And we are this is our second go at this, right? The first one didn't work so well.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Technical difficulties.
Did the power went out? Were you here in the office?
I was here in the office.
Okay,
The
power went out. It was just not meant to
Wi-Fi was out.
Wi-Fi was out. All of a sudden you were, just everything went blank. I was like, Kirk, you still there? But here we are. We're both sitting in the same office, so if the power goes out here again, I guess we just deal with it then. But we want to cover what FastTrack doesn't cover. And so let's start off at the 50,000-foot level. What is FastTrack?
Okay. FastTrack is a Microsoft program. You can learn more about it at fasttrack.microsoft.com.
Mm-hmm.
And it covers really their program to get people onto the cloud, get them onto Office 365 and Dynamics. And in our case, we're talking more about SharePoint. So, and also they have a set of, it's a larger program, but they have a set of services to help customers migrate from their on-prem version of SharePoint, either SharePoint 2010 or 2013, although I think they only advertised 2013, to Office 365 or the SharePoint Online.
Okay.
And
so it's FastTrack for SharePoint, or is that the
probably, but I don't know if there's a URL.
Okay.
So.
But FastTrack covers a lot of different Microsoft products, but the one we primarily focus in on is getting to SharePoint Online primarily.
Yeah, they'll do Exchange as well, and it's a free service they provide, but they get to choose who gets to use it, I guess, and you have to qualify. And for a while, they had an open qualification, or they were allowed people to request to get involved in this, and I don't know if they closed it off or exactly how you coordinate making it happen, but I know they're still doing them. So, and I would recommend it, especially for SharePoint migrations. I think it really can help.
So we've created a service that basically complements, augments what Microsoft does, and so as part of that, I think one of the key things that folks need to understand is what it does cover and what it doesn't cover. And so in this conversation, I wanted just to talk through with you what it does cover and doesn't cover. So tell me more about, start diving into what FastTrack is, what the phases are, and those types of things with FastTrack.
Yeah, they'll start out with have set a way of communicating to the companies, and they'll go through the PowerPoint decks. They'll describe their process, and in the end, their process is basically going to silence my phone. It's just going to happen. Their process is going to cover what they call a wave one, which is really kind of their trial set of site collections they're going to move for you. But before that happens, you have to be prepared for it. So there's some things you have to do to be ready. But they're gonna cover moving the bits after you provide a content database backup for them, and the mapping of which site collections you want to move and where you want them to go, as well as a mapping of users and groups. And then they'll migrate that over a series of they have a prep phase, a migration phase, and a UAT phase, all within each wave. So it's these rolling phases, if you will, within each wave. They'll do that for wave one, and then they want to kind of be full speed ahead on another set of waves, like maybe 5 more waves. Then they'll do a maintenance window where you can update user and group mappings and some other things. and then they'll do another set of waves. It all depends on how much content you have. But in one we did recently, I think we had, let's see, I don't know, we had probably 11 waves, I think. So.
And is the wave how's it decided what goes into that? Is it amount of content that you're moving over, the number of site collections? What is it?
Yeah, there's a limit on both, and I believe it's 500 gigabytes per wave, and I think there's a limit on the number of site collections per wave as well. But I don't remember that. And the first wave has to be smaller. I think they want that to be maybe 100 gigabytes at the most, just to kind of get things going and kind of make sure both sides are ready to work with each other.
And who's the point of contact on the Microsoft? How does this work logistically between the two? Because we're like a third party involved. We have the client and then Microsoft FastTrack services, and then I imagine there's like a point of contact from each company that's coordinating all of this.
Yeah, that's right. And so you will have, once you really get rolling, we'll start having daily calls, or at least several times a week we'll have calls. And the FastTrack team will provide someone that you're communicating with, and that person coordinates with the rest of their team, which really can include, I think, upwards of 100 individuals. So it's not a small team, and they all need accounts, unless you'll let them have shared accounts to get in and do some work. And they do this just so they can spread this across all the work that they do. So it's a lot of people.
So on the FastTrack team at Microsoft has a lot of people who these are migration engineers who are and
they'll be running the tool, which is MetaLogic's Content Matrix.
Okay.
I know that's one tool that they use. I think that may be the only one, but I've heard them say they might use others in certain situations.
Okay.
But the migration engineers will use that tooling.
So is there a tool that you run that tells you these sites won't move? Like, how do you determine what they can do and what they can't do?
Right. So what FastTrack covers is, you have to give them basically a spreadsheet for each wave, and you have to do it at a predetermined time. It's like it's 2 weeks before the wave starts, or maybe a week before prep, and you're basically saying, here's the site collections that are in scope for this wave, and then they'll make sure that it meets the content database size requirements, or site collection size requirements. And then you'll have to upload every content database that those site collections are in by a certain date. But just doing that is kind of hard. You need to manage that process, and that's something they won't really help you with. They'll just kind of say, all right, what's next? And they will provide you the SMAT tool output, which is a tool you can download from Microsoft. It's free. It gives you migration analysis of what you have on your on-prem environment. It covers 2010 and 2013. There's different versions for each. And they'll also roll up that information into it's multiple sheets in a spreadsheet, but they'll roll that in because it's a lot of content that the tool creates, a lot of information. And it'll tell you what your inventory is, what site collections you have, but other things like running workflows, what site collections have running workflows and how many at that time. So they'll try and tell you things that the FastTrack doesn't cover, because it doesn't cover migrating running workflows. No tool will. They will cover migrating the workflow definitions and associations, but not the actual running workflows. And that's just because it's really not supported going to Office 365 to move something there, to move a running workflow there. But so the SMAT output will tell you several things that it doesn't do, but there's some things it doesn't tell you about that SMAT also doesn't cover, and that's one of the ways we kind of augmented the process. We wrote some scripts to try and understand things like, see if I can remember one or two. If you have any specific search settings on a site collection, doesn't move that, and we'll report those. That's one example.
Okay, and then so for what do you do in the cases where you have a site that's got a running workflow? How do you handle those sites? And What, like, when you find something that they can't migrate, are we migrating those sites, or what happens?
Yeah, so no, and for running workflows, you can't do it at all. So you could really go through a really manual process of trying to set up the workflows on the target environment in Office 365 to be like they were when they're migrated, but we don't do that either. It's really, so we work with the companies we work with on this. We'll create a set of migration policies, which is a document, and we work with them to refine it. But we have a base one of those that's a template that defines all the things that like basically FastTrack doesn't cover. So I mentioned running workflows. FastTrack also doesn't cover migrating lists or libraries with more than 5,000 items. So they just won't do that. They also will only cover a certain number of versions of items. I think that's 5, don't forget now. And so then if the SMAT will tell you that, or sometimes our scripts have to tell us a little bit more. We'll get that information and we'll say, oh wait, you know what? We just migrated this site and it had 2 lists that were 2 large lists. Lists that were larger than 5,000 items. The FastTrack team did not migrate that list. We know that. And then we have some post-processing we need to do. And in our case, we were migrating that for them, or working with our client to migrate that for them using, in our case, I think we used ShareGate, but we could have used Logix as well, or any of the others. But it was just something that they won't cover. And then so we kind of augmented the process to work with them on the communication side, where we're kind of communicating, hey, this is the process it's going to take. If you have a large list, it's not going to go right away. You want you to know that. You're going to go through a UAT period where that large list isn't there. Yeah. And then we're going to push it out after that UAT period. So, because FastTrack team doesn't want us migrating things until UAT is signed off and over. So they'll do the incremental after that as well. So right after the incremental, which happens over the weekend for each wave, then we'll go in and do the large list. We'll also, in our case, we looked at workflow definitions that failed to copy, and we would go in and special case those and see if we could move them over. A lot of times it was because they were using things that just weren't supported in the target environment, and so we couldn't migrate them as well. And so we have policies that would kind of document that these things are not covered, and these would need to be read by the site owners so that they knew what was coming. And since, when you're working with large companies, they're going to have a large number of site collections, and they can't manage hand-holding each one of these. So the site owners have to come up with what's their plan going to be. And if that plan involves, I've got to get, some developers involved to make this happen, well, then hopefully you give them enough time. You start preparing that early so that they know that we can tell them from the SMAT report. We can say, hey, looks like you've got some large lists out there. Maybe we don't support moving that. FastTrack doesn't, but we could. Or you've got a large number of workflows. It's a good chance those workflows may not migrate for one reason or another. Info path forms that may be going against a custom database. It's not going to work. Lots of things like that.
And was the end state that you moved everything over to SharePoint Online, or is it a hybrid environment?
For this client, it was a hybrid. We would go through through the SMAT analysis, and there was already some site collections the client knew they didn't want to go to SharePoint Online. They had a way of designating site collections that were confidential, and so they made an early decision that those wouldn't go to SharePoint Online. Later, they've changed their minds, and they did go to SharePoint Online. But there were others that were more complex. They knew they had custom code, maybe a farm solution, and custom web parts, and that those were not going to be supported going over. So the choice was, let's just get them over to SharePoint 2016 in our case. And so we're working with them actually currently to migrate applications over to SharePoint 2016.
I would imagine in some of these large company environments, there might be a lot of third-party stuff as well. Did you run into that?
Yeah, they were. They have some, clean? But they're pretty clean when it came to that. They had some, but not much.
Because that seems like that catches a lot of folks.
Yeah, definitely. They did a pretty good job of limiting limiting their users in certain ways that I think was beneficial. So they weren't allowed to. That FastTrack will cover this, but they weren't allowed to do like break permissions everywhere. They did have one custom set of permissions, which custom permissions FastTrack kind of says they don't support, but the tooling does underneath the covers for the most part. But they just know there's caveats with that, so they say they don't support it, and we've got to kind of follow up and make sure that it's working properly.
What else have you? Because you hit on things like InfoPath, running workflows.
Oh gosh.
Anything else that is out there? I guess that are things that people just should be aware that aren't new by a FastTrack team.
Yeah, I should have a list of that in front of me, and I don't. But
It's
there's definitely a lot of things that FastTrack is not going to cover, and but they tend to be corner cases.
Yeah.
So basically, lists and library content is going to be covered. Custom master pages, they're not going to work.
Okay.
Almost certainly not going to work. If you've got some custom JavaScript running in a content editor web part or a script web part,
what about publishing sites?
Yeah, they do move over. But I believe that was definitely a focus of ours. I think now in our case, the client did not have many of these at all. Had very few. They locked that down. But I believe there can be problems, but I do believe they move over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there can be a lot of things. There could be things like folder depth. So how deep do your files go within a document library in terms of folders, and how does that work in the target environment? An example is if you use Office web apps like Exchange Online to open up a file, it might have a problem if the folder depth is too much, whereas just downloading the file will work. There's some weird issues that can pop up like that, and we try to communicate that.
Any of this, was this just SharePoint Online, or was Yammer involved at all, or Teams, or anything else that?
For us, nothing directly. They were doing Exchange Online through the FastTrack program as well at the same time, and that was supposed to happen kind of first, and it didn't completely happen first. They were finishing up while we were starting. And so we coordinated with them. We would have regular meetings, but it really wasn't a problem for us.
What did the team look like? So it was like, how was this structured as far as, I was sort of commenting on this earlier, which was, there's sort of point of contact in each of the companies. But from our side, like, how did you run this like a typical 2-week sprints? Was this sort of an unusual project, or tell me, sort of classify a little bit about the process and a little bit about the team necessary for this?
Right. So any migration is not going to be true agile. It's got a more rigid process, but you do have to be agile because things come up like the client says, "Oh, we want all of these confidential sites now to go to Office 365 because the security team just approved it." But we would try to have a regular cadence of 2 weeks, sort of like 2-week sprints where we kind of reviewed things. But we would also have weekly calls and weekly meetings as well as daily. But the weekly ones with Microsoft or the daily ones, those would kind of go over where are we within a wave. Oh, okay, wave 2 is in UAT, and wave 3 is in migration, and let's see, no, it would be backwards. No, that's right. And wave 4 is in prep. And then wave 5 is we got to upload our content database this week and provide our mappings. So we would kind of go over all of those things. We had a checklist of things we needed to go through every week. And we usually did one on Mondays and on Fridays, so that we kind of, because there's a lot of activity that has to happen towards the end of the week and at the beginning of the week, or we kind of just want to make sure that we're going to cover things. We would upload our content databases in the middle of the week. UAT would be done Thursdays. We would be setting the site collections to read only on Fridays after UAT for Friday afternoons for a incremental, and then we would have those would be basically read only on the source from then on, and then we'd have mail merge emails that would go out to Microsoft, be applying banner messages. We would have scripts that would help with the mail merge and some other things. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was neat. So from our side on our team was relatively small from 3will. It was primarily Pete Skelly and myself, and we both played several roles. On the client side, we would have a project manager. We had an individual that was in charge of touching SharePoint more directly, and that person might be setting site collections to read only through a script that we wrote. So they just have to say, to run that for wave 5, and it'll just do it for all site collections wave 5. There would be another individual that might run, could have been the same individual, but another individual in their case that ran the large list copies or workflow definitions that failed to copy. We'd work with them on that and kind of manage the whole thing. We managed we helped provide the structure for most of the communications. So the client's communications team was involved as well. They would approve the messages we came up with, and they could tweak what we wanted to say. We'd send out mail merge emails to the site collection owners at various times throughout the process, tell them what's going on. They'd have, of course, the site to go to, hosted in SharePoint Online that would have documentation of what they could do and had our policies that were already announced to them that they could review. And they could see kind of what issues they had. Like you've got a couple of large lists, you've got some info path forms, might be a problem, things of that nature. So,
what a part of the reason why I think we're doing lots of migrations is it's a good thing for an outside partner to help out with. Primarily because it's you learn a lot of things doing it the first time, and then applying it to other. Like your internal folks, why should they spend so much time and energy doing something that they're only going to do once? Mm-hmm. And so I think the reason why I think people see value out of bringing an outside partner, I could see as well. It brings value where we're involved in coordinating with the client and with Microsoft, and we're handling a lot of those things. I'm also hearing from you that there's also what we would call something that would be in like an accelerator, which is here's all of the scripts and things like this that in addition that will keep us out of trouble and make sure the migration goes successfully. Is that what would you say are the main benefits of bringing us on to this project and having us help out with augmenting what FastTrack does?
Well, I think the main benefit is we kind of know what to expect, and we can cover some corner cases that you wouldn't have thought of. So the FastTrack team at Microsoft, they have their own process. They're going to tell you about that process, and they'll try and guide you through it. But they're just not going to tell you certain things that maybe they don't know about, but that you're going to come up against, and they'll kind of say, okay, here's the things we don't cover, just so you know that. And maybe that means you need to have a process around how you're going to communicate that, and maybe it's just lots of things. Like we found that with this client that as we're sending out these messages that hey, your wave's about to go, or we would send an email like weeks in advance, then they would come back and say, oh, you know what, these site collections are out of scope. We don't care about them anymore. They don't need to be moved. They should be deleted. I'm sure all companies are going to find that. So you got a lot of site collections. And, managing that is kind of tough. We bring in like 30 of those at once. You got to go tweak some master list somewhere. So we had scripts that would take the SMAT output, populate a SharePoint list that we could then set properties on, and then we had scripts that we then mass update that list with, say, all of the site collections that are now out of scope because we've been getting communication from the various site owners that they can be removed from migration. So, so I think that the main one is really just the knowledge of the process and how we think it needs to be augmented by someone other than the FastTrack team, because the FastTrack will not cover it. And then obviously we do bring some assets to the table. We've got, there's several lists we create that helps us manage the process. And then there's around a dozen PowerShell scripts that we've got out there that do things that I've already mentioned. But Other things like your wave start dates may change, and we need those to be updated. In our case, well, for FastTrack, they want to know who the content owner and technical owner is, because that's their part of their process. They're going to send out communications to them, and that means you've got to know who your site owners are, at least at a minimum. And then so you got to have a process for figuring that out. And sometimes those people have left the company, and so it's not necessarily all that simple. And so you want to have a way to manage that. And so we've got ways of doing that. I think on the support side that we've got a way of FastTrack team does have an issues list that they use, but then it's gonna be out of scope after UAT is done. And if the team doesn't respond about a particular site collection by the end of UAT, then it's assumed accepted. So if there are issues after that, what are you going to do? So you need to have a way of managing that process. You want to be able to still support your users after they've migrated and Microsoft has kind of washed their hands clean of that wave. You still want to support them. So,
and we have, what I like about this project is at the end of it, nothing happened. There wasn't a lot of drama.
Right. This one went very smoothly.
Yes.
It's not quick, right? They had
how many? Yeah, give me some
trying to
rough
remember
numbers.
the
Amount of data, maybe number of site collections, and then how long it took. You said 11 waves, so is that 22 weeks, or is that?
No, it was. I think it was about 26 weeks, not counting some earlier prep stuff. So, and that's because, well, I've got something here that shows me 29 weeks. So, but there's going to be like wave one is not staggered. It has like 4 or 5 weeks that it takes. It goes through, you've got to upload your migration database. Microsoft's going to have a prep week, a migration week, a UAT week. They're going to have a post-processing week. So all of that is happening. So that's at least 5 weeks right there. And that happens, most of that happens without wave 2 starting, because wave 1 is they want to treat that as a special wave. It's almost like a pilot. And it's a smaller amount of content. Then you're going to go through your other waves, which are staggered. So, when wave 2 is in migration, wave 3 is in prep, and wave 4, you're uploading the content databases to Microsoft. And then they use Azure for that, by the way. So then after you maybe do the next 5 waves, they're going to want a maintenance window. They're going to work with you as to when those maintenance windows should be. And it might be around things like holidays and stuff like that too. In our case, we were migrating through the fall of last year. And so Thanksgiving, Christmas holidays all came up. So we did plan for one of those breaks, I believe, to be during Christmas, basically, Christmas, New Year's. And that maintenance window provides another gap. You kind of have to flush the queue of all these waves that are going through, and then you'll start up the next set of waves, and then they have to flush the queue again, and you may go through another set. But before you do My Sites, if you're going to migrate My Sites, that's kind of all on its own as well. So kind of like that first wave is all on its own. The My Sites are done at the end, all on their own. So
it's interesting because I think because of our app dev background, you guys are able to do things like the 12 set of scripts and things like that, that if we were pure infrastructure where we didn't have that in our toolbox, we would get stuck in certain situations, really not know how to handle that. And it's interesting as well, because in order for us to do what we want to do for these large clients, which is build on the cloud, they've got to be in the cloud. So it's, for us, I think there's, it's been a logical progression for us to, in order for us to get them over, we need to help them get over to that. And then sort of like the next step in the evolution of what we're doing as a business, I think we're getting to the point where, now that they're in the cloud, we can start talking about configuring and then customizing and then building more things like line of business solutions and stuff like that. But if they've never moved over, then it's difficult for us to talk about those things.
Well, yeah, I mean, it still can happen on-prem, but if you do it with the traditional means on-prem, that's a problem. Well, it'll pose a problem for them in the future if they do decide to move to the cloud. cloud. So
Yeah.
you would rather not. And you can do some of the cloud approaches on-prem. That's possible depending on like the version of SharePoint.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's there's one script that we have to do that we ran to kind of figure out, well, of all these groups that you're being mapped to Azure Active Directory from your AD on-prem, there were a lot that kind of failed to map, and we kind of had a script that figured that out, and then we would write a script to basically dig into all the site collections that are going over. This script took a very long time to run, and it would basically say, oh, in this wave, which of these sites use these Azure AD groups or these AD groups that do not exist in Azure AD for whatever reason. And then we can communicate out, well, hey, site owner, you're using, these groups have permissions on-prem, but they don't in Office 365. And, with our app dev background, we're able to do that. Now, we did find someone that had a script that we modified for that, so that helped. But, without that, then basically site owners kind of just find out later on that, oh, all of a sudden this whole group of users can't access my stuff, and I didn't know about it. So, it's good to help in the communication.
One last thing, and it's something you need to think about.
All right, I'm ready.
If you had to think of 2 things that you wish that you knew before this project, two of the most important things that you wish you knew before this project started out, or things that were picked up. Can you think of 2? Let me ask you that.
The project went really smoothly. We had to react several times, and I'm sure there were times we were frustrated based on kind of the situation. But I can't remember one of those times. I mean, it went smoothly. That this client did have some things locked down, and that helped them out. The less you have locked down before the move, potentially the more issues you're going to have. I can't think of anything. I think they did a good job of kind of deciding, hey, these things are going to have problems. Let's move them on-prem. We're going to do that as a separate project, which is underway now, and that's a whole set of different circumstances, a whole set of different tasks and operations you do. But
was this run IT side of it? Was a more of like a pure IT function? Was there? I guess you said content owners were involved, but was there an executive sponsor of this, or was this more of an IT, a modernization of infrastructure type of thing?
Yeah, I'm sure there was an executive sponsor. We just didn't deal with that individual. So I know they got approval for when, and the whole timing I think changed a little bit at one point because, once we said, hey, these are some issues, and then that you're going to run into, and with the Exchange migration dates changing, I think that might have changed our dates a little bit. But and the executive sponsor, I believe, was involved with those decisions. But for the most part, we were working with a small team from the client to make it all happen, along with a large team from Microsoft. So.
Okay. Cool. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I would like to do, maybe as a follow up, is get a better understanding of what those scripts are, what they do. Like maybe write this up, like put an accelerator page out on our website and describe what those things are, because I think that's valuable for folks to know. And it sounds like we've created a process sort of wrapped around the whole FastTrack process for managing all of this.
Yeah.
And we did get to the finish line, and that client's very happy. And so, starting to how can we do something similar for our next client who needs similar type of services?
Right. And we have some of the processes we use in this, and some of the scripts even are used in our other migrations that don't involve FastTrack.
Really?
So yeah, so I mean, we always want to have an inventory list, and we like it to be in SharePoint that has basically a row per site collection, and then it has additional information about that. And we have scripts that interact with that. We have scripts that will pull SMAT data and push that in there. And if you're a small company, it's likely that Microsoft is not going to accept you into the FastTrack program.
Yeah.
So if you're a big one, it's likely they will. So, but So, we use some of the same scripts to kind of manage the process. And then we've, outside of FastTrack, we've got ways of orchestrating the tooling, both MetaLogix and ShareGate to some degree, mostly MetaLogix, but I think we're moving forward on ShareGate as well. And that we didn't need that for FastTrack for the most part. Now, we could have used a little bit of that with this last project, but since, basically, we would like use those tools to migrate large lists and workflows, workflow definitions that failed to go. And since that number was relatively small, we did that by hand. We configured it by hand. So
nice. And you get a kick out of this. Pete and I are working on sort of modernizing our digital workplace here at 3Will. Mm-hmm. So we have like 350, somewhere between 300 and 400 site collections. So he did an inventory of those, and yesterday I was going through, and we're you know how much we're using Teams, so we're moving more towards a model of using Teams. So we had the old site, we had sites where some of it, the content didn't move over, so we're talking about sort of how do we move some of that content over, and deleting things, cleaning up where Pete's going to, believe it or not, we're going to have a governance plan inside of 3Will, where, don't create dev sites on our 3Will tenant, go create your own, dev sites and try to keep it clean, to put some control over our environment. I know that's a crazy thing. But we went through and we were doing things like some of those, Pete's going to go through the whole modernization of some of those sites. So that has a new modern interface to it. And so, and really we're organizing all of the account sites so that there'll be an accounts hub. And then we're organizing the department site so that our homepage will be a hub for our department site. So just sort of organizing things inside of 3Will.
Nice. Yeah,
it's good. We've got the new digital workplace workshop that we're running with folks. So I'm taking some of his materials and we're applying it internally, and hopefully that'll help him as he goes out and delivers that workshop, or whoever delivers the workshop.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. This last client where we did the FastTrack migration, that was not something they wanted at the time, but I think it makes a ton of sense to say, well, now you've got the content over there, but it's all just individual site collections, and they're not kind of connected in any way. Maybe you want that to happen. So
yeah, cool, very cool. Well, if you're listening to this and you're obviously interested in FastTrack and you're maybe looking at this as something that your organization is going to do, number one, I hope this was insightful. Hearing that someone has done it and done it successfully and made the move over, and it sounds like a pretty large client. And if you see enough value in having us come in and help coordinate it and some of the things that we discussed in this podcast, obviously reach out to us through the Contact Us page, and we can set up a follow-up conversation with Kirk where we can go into more detail about maybe a particular subject that you want to go through. But we'd love to do this with more clients. It sounds like something that they were really happy with, and something where, sort of the partner brings in the solution. So we bring in the last little bit, that last 20% that puts you over the edge. And so why do migrations are a one-time thing? Why learn all this stuff yourself so that you never have to apply it again? Bring in our knowledge to help you with this move. And so reach out to us through the Contact Us page on our website, and I'd love to follow up with you on this. And thank you, Kirk, for doing this. Congratulations on a successful project with this, and hopefully we can find some more clients who want to do something similar with this. So thanks everybody for listening, and have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.